The evolution of the BRICS, which are more than half of the world's population, incidentally, and growing, was inevitable. Why? Because the major export of the U.S. for the last 40 years has not been Boeings or soybeans or anything. It's been dollars. We ship out, now it's close to $1 trillion a year that goes abroad. And those nice foreigners give us Mercedes and Sonys and other good things in exchange for those dollars. So as a result of that, we have, nobody knows exactly what the number is, but it's 20, 30, 40 trillion dollars of American money that's in the hand of foreigners. But they don't have to hold it. Americans have to use dollars. That's the law. Foreigners don't. And when they lose confidence in the dollar, and confidence can blow away like a pile of feathers in a hurricane, they'll dump the dollars. To whom? That's a good question, because everybody's going to lose confidence at the same time. Well, what'll happen? Well, they'll all come back to the U.S. to buy American land and businesses and everything. So Americans will be truly impoverished. We've been living way above our means for 40 years, shipping out these dollars, which are kind of an indirect form of debt, if you would. And when people don't want it, they'll come back and buy stuff in the U.S. And it won't be owned by Americans anymore. Well, maybe we can just give all those nice foreigners U.S. passports, which is happening anyway. There's millions of people flow across the borders, Mexican border, feed people every year. So it's a chaotic situation that's on the way from that point of view. Anyway, the BRICS, they want to put together their own currency. Well, good idea, and their own SWIFT system. Good idea, because you don't want to use the dollar, which has been weaponized, as the Russians found, by the U.S. government, and the SWIFT system, which they use to punish people they don't like. And they're talking about their own currency. And they say partially gold back. Well, that's a stupid idea. You either have a real money, which is gold, or Bitcoin. I'm very favorably inclined towards Bitcoin for a lot of reasons, too. They can put together a phony baloney currency like the euro, but it'll fall apart eventually because they can't trust each other. I mean, the Russians and the Indians and the Chinese, they can't trust each other. They can't have a common currency, for God's sake. It's even less possible than, that Esperanto currency they have in Europe, the euro. They should just use gold, period. That's how you trade. And my answer is they're going to go to gold. And that's why gold is going a lot higher, because it's the only financial asset that's not simultaneously somebody else's liability, with the exception of Bitcoin. So their new phony baloney currency might work for a while, but it won't work. I think the Vietnamese are part of it too. Who wants a Vietnamese dong? Who wants to hold on to that? It's being inflated out of existence. You want to be paid with that. And what are the Vietnamese going to pay with? What are the Brazilians going to pay with? Nobody wants to hold on to a South American country's currency. That's goofy. So what are you going to pay with? Dollars? No, don't want to use dollars. They're going to wind up using gold. And the U.S. has brought this on itself. You should not treat gold now as a speculative vehicle. It has been a very good speculative vehicle at times in the past, but gold is basically money. You buy gold for prudence, for safety, for insurance, for savings. It's to set aside wealth that you can deploy in the future towards something you want or something that's productive. It's just a way to keep your powder dry. That's why you buy gold. Not all at once, but every month. That's how you save. You don't save with US or Canadian dollars. That's a mug's game. I've been saving in gold for 50 years. I've never sold an ounce. And it's treated me very well as a savings vehicle, and it will continue to. Now, if you want to speculate on the price of gold, you've got, what's the number, 2,700 mining stocks in Canada. Or they say they're mining stocks. They're mostly exploration stocks, few development stocks, some producers. But that's what you should do if you want to speculate. I thought that the gold stocks would have been off and running long before. Now they haven't, because gold's been moving up so much. You'd think the people would do this. The reason they haven't moved, it turns out, is because of the rise of this insane ESG DEI movement. Gold mining, or mining in general, actually, is considered a very non-PC business. You're raping Mother Earth. You're making the bugs and the bunnies unhappy when you have big yellow machines, digging holes in the ground and stuff like that. So the big money has stayed far away from it because that's a man's business, basically, too. And you're not supposed to be a man anymore. I don't know, we're supposed to get all kinds of black women as geologists all of a sudden out there doing this. Another reason is that tech stocks have run. And any young person saying, hey, I'd much rather take a shot at $1 billion playing on my computer like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or a bunch of other guys that have made lots of money doing that than go out and play around in the dirt with big yellow machines. So that's another reason why people are just not interested in it. It's got a bad reputation, for the reasons that I just mentioned. That's going to change, because if you want the world to continue the way it is, you need metals. You need lots and lots of copper for the so-called electrification of the world. You want your EV to be chargeable? Well, you're going to need copper and cobalt and tantalum and lithium, just a whole bunch of these things, in addition to gold and in addition to silver. Gold is the most non-degradable, the most inert of all the naturally occurring elements, which is a big plus. And silver is the most reflective and the most conductive. They're not going away, purely technological reasons, although it's not really important in gold's case. It is for silver. If you want to have a giant data center, you really can't tap into the local grid because it's just too much extra power. And of course, if you want a new power plant, they'll try to tell them to put up windmills and solar collectors, which is crazy. So you're going to have to build a new coal plant. Incidentally, I'm very bullish on coal and coal stocks. Some Australian coal companies are yielding well over 15% in current dividends, and I think those dividends are going higher. You've got small natural gas companies in Canada that are yielding 5, 6, 7%. Natural gas is $2.75 or something like that per MCF. It's pretty much historic lows, absolutely, relative to oil. They're going way up. I'm really bullish, not just on mining companies, but also on oil and gas companies and uranium companies. So I feel pretty good, having weathered the bear market and these things. And next we'll have a bull market. And I hope to make a huge amount of money. And I don't know what I'll do with it. And of course, you got to gird your loins, because you don't know what kind of insanity is going to visit itself upon the world in the next few years. Even if Trump does all the right things, you want to insulate yourself from what I think could still be a gigantic catastrophe that we're looking at for a lot of reasons. Anyway, more is better, especially when it comes to money, especially if that money's in gold. The world runs on hydrocarbons. It's nice occasionally, in certain applications where it makes sense, to use wind or to use solar collectors. So wind and solar are fine, but they're completely uneconomic most of the time. You only use them in isolated, special situation areas where they can make sense. But for mass power generation, they're actually insane to try to use them for lots of reasons, because they're both intermittent power. And you can't run an industrial civilization on intermittent power. They say, well, we use batteries. But these people don't understand the amount of batteries that it would take to charge with these things when they're not working. It's actually criminally insane, the amount of money they're spending. It's all being wasted. Losing money now, lose more money in the future, deindustrialize the West in the future. So oil and gas are where it's at. And there's hundreds of years of oil and gas that'll be retrieved. And I'm fine with them. In fact, if you don't want to use hydrocarbons, then you should use nuclear, which is by far the safest and the cheapest and the cleanest form of mass power generation. And with the next generation, if these idiotic regulators allow it to happen, of nuclear plants, they'll be small, like the ones on U.S. Navy ships, submarines. Charge them, forget them for 10 years, basically. That's what they're working on. Can be many of them, cheap, safe, clean. That'll solve these problems. The big enemy in all of this is the U.S. government. Same with the Canadian government, same with the European governments. It seems like they want to bankrupt their populaces. So I think we'd already have colonized Mars, quite frankly, if it hadn't been for these governments wasting gigantic amounts of capital and putting up regulations which make it inefficient to deploy the capital that we have left. Well, if you're talking to Americans in the past have always thought first of Canada. But, that's jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, going from the U.S. to Canada. And Australia is terrible, too. I used to live in New Zealand, and it's cyclically gotten better. But so where do you go? Well, I'm here in Argentina and Uruguay, and especially with the election of Javier Milei earlier this year. He's, like myself, he's an avowed anarcho-capitalist. He doesn't believe the state serves a useful purpose. Milei here in Argentina sees the state as the enemy of the common man, which it is. And he's been disassembling it. It's been slower than he'd like, or I'd like, but he's been firing tens of thousands of government employees. they can go out and do something worthwhile with their lives now. And Argentina is being liberated. Inflation here has gone down from hundreds of percent per year. Now it's down to like 40% per year. Very high, but it's going to zero here. And the regulations are being cut off. So actually, I'd say that Argentina and second choice is Uruguay are the best places in the world to be. These countries are going to boom. You're going to find not just some, but you're going to find tens of thousands of wealthy Europeans that want to get the hell out of Europe, which is a sinking ship. It's a cesspool at this point. But they're going to come here to Argentina and Uruguay. This place is going to boom for all kinds of reasons. If you're an American or a Canadian, your financial risks are great, but your political risks are greater. So you have to diversify politically. You have to think like a Russian might have in 1917, or a German in 1933, or a Cuban in 1959, or a Chinese in 1947. I can give you a list of 30 or 40 countries where if you didn't have a crib outside your home country, you were bankrupt or dead, basically, or living in a lunatic asylum for the rest of your life.